Thank you very much, Royal College of Music's Junior Department. Distinguished guests, Reflections of the Lord Mayor is not merely an occasion to hear former Lord Mayors of London talk about their experiences in office, but also to hear their insights on the future. As 688th Lord Mayor, Lord Mountevans championed the life of the city and UK PLC, and has continued this task in his current capacity as Chairman of Maritime London. One of my first reactions when I read Lord Mountevans' synopsis of this evening's reflections was one of sadness. As I recall the atrocity that befell Paris on the eve of his 2015 Lord Mayor's show. And last year alone, there were 5 atrocities that caused untold harm to lives across London and Manchester. It seemed appropriate to remember all those whose lives have been affected or cut short by these events. I will now ask the Toastmaster to raise a toast.
Please stand. And the toast is absent praise.
Absent praise.
Please sit.
But we have enormous reason for optimism. I have now lived in UK for well over 30 years, and the characteristic I notice the most is the resilience of the people who have made UK in general, and London in particular, their home. I'm very proud to call this my home. For me, Lord Mountevans' theme for the evening, innovation and resilience, have profound resonance. They will, I'm certain, resonate with you. Distinguished guests, I'm honored to welcome our Reflections of the Lord Mayor Speaker 2018, the Lord Mountevans.
Your Excellency, Minister, Deputy Master, Aldermen, Masters, ladies and gentlemen. Well, after that wonderful recital and Cyrus's journey, I hope you're ready for some more good listening. May I begin by first extending my own very warm personal welcome to you all at Trinity House, one of the most important maritime organizations here in this very maritime country. Thank you, Deputy Master, for the opportunity to dine in this glorious and historic setting. The Lord Mayor, who holds office for just 1 year, heads the corporation and is primarily the chief spokesman and ambassador for London and the UK's world-leading financial and professional services. Because the city's role is so wide and there are numerous stakeholders to represent and engage with, there are many who contribute to the very busy program, including the government. For example, the Overseas Visits program is developed in conjunction with the FCO and business. National and international events, as well as important anniversaries, also play a role. What I'm trying to indicate is that the Lord Mayor does not have as much rudder over his or her program as you might have imagined. However, Lord Mayors each have their own individual character and their own individual style. They also have their own individual business backgrounds. The 1 year of office is, I believe, an advantage as it brings energy and freshness and enables a spotlight to be shone on different sectors each year in line with the individual's background. As many of you know, and as has been already indicated, my background is very maritime. I had, as a teenager, planned a career in the Royal Navy. In the event, my eyesight wasn't quite good enough to meet the high standards required for my intended specialization. I quickly switched my interest to those superb Royal Marines, but managed to smash myself up rather unfortunately playing rugby. Disappointed, I decided that I had better focus on preparing myself for a career in Civvy Street, rather than a life in the services. But maritime is a very strong gene, and after Cambridge, I realized that still what I really wanted to do was something related to ships. I was lucky enough to join a great firm of international shipbrokers, today the world leader. And following 45 years of broking, the business of seeking agreement in an industry at the heart of world trade, where 85% of trade moves by sea, gave me exposure to many industries and specializations, and I would like to think fostered a degree of diplomatic skill. Like all Lord Mayors, I wanted the city to contribute to the greatest effect, where possible, to the welfare of London and of the nation, whilst very specifically doing all that I could to promote the financial and professional services of London and the UK nationally and internationally. In the years 2013 to 15, when I was preparing myself, hopefully, to be elected Lord Mayor, I was much struck by the strong strand of innovation increasingly evident and at work in Britain. So that I chose as my theme for the year, Innovate Here, Succeed Anywhere, which resonated strongly through the year, and not least after the referendum, as Britain began to shape a future outside the EU. I had been warned that what most surprises people when they first take office as Lord Mayor is the sheer pace. Despite having served as sheriff in 2013, supporting and working closely with the then Lord Mayor, Sir Roger Gifford, and though having made every effort to prepare myself, I was no exception. A typical day in the Mansion House starts with a breakfast meeting at 8 and includes an average of 8 to 10 appointments. It can be up to 15, including meetings with international as well as business leaders, ambassadors, etc., almost invariably finishing with a dinner to complete the day at around 11. On top of this intense Mansion House program, the Lord Mayor spends around 100 days on overseas visits, often leaving Mansion House very early to catch short-haul flights, or late, and often on a Friday night or Saturday morning, for long-haul destinations. Similarly, on returning, it was typically to go straight back into the program. How can this pace be achieved and maintained, you might very well ask? Well, that brings me to my first reflections point, the high caliber and amazing dedication of the corporation's officers and staff, not least in the Mansion House, backed up with the excellent support from the civic team and fellow elected members. And I'm delighted to see one of my brilliant sheriffs, Christine Rigdon, here tonight. There isn't time to go into detail across the corporation. The standard is universally high. But I would like to take this opportunity to highlight one group who you might not immediately think of, the City of London Police. They keep the city safe and undertake daily many specializations that we may not see, including cybersecurity and fraud investigation and prevention. But I was particularly reminded of their wide role when I was privileged to represent the Lord Mayor just last Friday in Mansion House at a ceremony to award commendations to a large number of City of London police and staff who were first responders and then heavily engaged, indeed directing, the whole follow-up operation to the terrorist incident at London Bridge and Borough Market. Working seamlessly with the Metropolitan Police and the British Transport Police. When these awful events happen, ordinary people want to run away. These people, without exception, go towards the danger. It was a very humbling experience and brought me back to the first 24 hours of my mayoralty, which indeed Chris mentioned, when the atrocity in Paris took place in the evening of the silent ceremony. The question was put rightly during the night whether the show should go ahead, if that was appropriate, and if we could be sure that the citizens of London and all those taking part would be safe. The decision was taken that it was right for the show to go ahead. We would not give in to terrorism. And importantly, the City of London Police assured those involved in the decision that they would have a safe show. I think between all involved, we got it right. At an appropriate moment in the show, the Sinn Féin Lord Mayor of Dublin, who is taking part in the magnificent stagecoach of the Lord Mayor of Dublin, stood side by side with me on the Mansion House balcony for the 2-minute silence to show support for Paris. It was a powerful moment and a powerful statement against terrorism. Well, let's get on to brighter things. My foreign travel itinerary took me to 26 countries. My second reflections point is that we Brits are far more positively regarded abroad than we see ourselves. This is particularly true with the media. Time does not permit a full report, but I hope to give at least a flavour, given the width, depth and quality of London and the UK's offer in financial and professional services, and don't forget that 2/3 of the 2.2 million jobs are outside London. As Lord Mayor, you have so many services and specialisations to promote, which could be mutually beneficial in different world markets. I hope you'll indulge me if I present a few impressions in addition to my reflections. My very first trip in the second week of my mayoralty was to Malta for the Commonwealth Business Forum, the first time the Lord Mayor, or indeed the corporation, had attended this event. The principal objective was to familiarise Commonwealth business leaders with the financial and professional services and international advisory expertise available in London, and ways in which the city could support infrastructure growth. Interestingly, prior to the referendum being called, the corporation already sought to engage more closely with the Commonwealth, supporting the CWEIC from its early days, and we were, of course, a major sponsor of the Commonwealth Business Forum hosted principally in Guildhall just 2 weeks ago. The important visit to Kuwait, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, together with a later visit to Bahrain to mark 200 years of UK-Bahraini relations, and to Oman, served principally to reinforce the strong bonds with the region, not least at a time then of low energy prices. As an honorary captain in the Royal Naval Reserve, I was delighted to visit the new Royal Navy supply base, HMS Jafir, in Bahrain, formally opened last month by the Duke of York, which gives the Navy a base in the Gulf and indeed east of Suez. Next was Africa, and 3 countries broadly in similar latitudes, but facing completely different challenges. Angola, at that time hit by low energy and commodity prices particularly hard, and ranked the 181st country out of 189 in the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index. Then Zambia, where our shared Commonwealth heritage ensured a very warm welcome. Among many people I met on that trip, I especially remember and will never forget the finance minister, Mr. Chikwande, who had studied in Sweden in the early 60s. I addressed him in Swedish, jokingly, and asking him if he'd learned to speak the language, whereupon he answered in Swedish, and we had quite a conversation, much to everybody's surprise. Jokingly, I asked in English, how was his French? Whereupon he answered fluently, and we had a brief conversation in that language. Everybody present was surprised and amused. A Russian-speaking member of the business delegation jokingly addressed him, to which the septuagenarian minister responded in Russian. India followed, obviously a key market. Discussions there covered a host of topics, including insurance, where Lloyds were awaiting a license, green finance, the internationalization of the rupee, fintech, as well as education, training and qualifications. I raised the question of access to the Indian reinsurance market for Lloyds and received some reassuring words from the Finance Minister, Mr. Jaitley. I was pleased to learn soon after my return that Lloyds market regulations had been issued. For me, born in Sweden and 25% Norwegian, the visit to Sweden, Norway and Finland was a particular pleasure. The visit took place against universal concern there that the UK might leave the EU. I had the pleasure of visiting Gothenburg, the city of my birth, and the first Lord Mayor to go there. Sweden, of course, is very advanced in the use and development of green finance, where I had assisted at the launch of the city's Green Finance Initiative at the Mansion House in January. For those of you among you who are maritime enthusiasts, I had the very special pleasure of a large private dinner in my honour, hosted by Mr. Dan Olsen, the principal of Stena Line. On the day I arrived in Oslo, the main TV channel broadcast an interview with me in Mansion House, some of which, for some inexplicable reason, I had ventured to address in Norwegian. One of my cousins in Oslo, listening whilst doing something else, was somewhat stunned to look up at the screen and see me. In Latin America, I visited Chile, Brazil, and Cuba. In Chile and Brazil, an objective was to promote London as an alternative to Miami and New York, as well as the potential of green finance, not least for the huge mining industries in these countries. In Chile, I attended the vast and important Expo mining exhibition, where I was hugely impressed by the large number of British innovators and SMEs selling green technologies to the mining industry, which, of course, is much preoccupied with the challenge of cleaning up their industry. Fintech, where Britain is a world leader, also featured heavily in the programs, both in Chile and Brazil. But Cuba was fascinating. Given the country's improving relations with Obama's USA, I was the first Lord Mayor to visit Havana. I followed hot on the heels of the then Chancellor, Philip Hammond, and perhaps more dramatically, the Rolling Stones, who had performed a huge open-air concert the previous weekend. The Cubans certainly were getting some intense British interaction. The people, as some of you may know who have holidayed there, will know, are delightful, and the old 50s and 60s American cars pure delight. My presentation centered on Britain's ability to help build capacity and the quality of advice from London. Cuba has two official rates of exchange, which in turn has fostered a number of other rates of exchange. The challenge of dismantling these in socialist Cuba is immense. I offered to put them in touch with the Bank of England to discuss exchange rate management, and was delighted when, some weeks later, I received in Mansion House a delegation on their way to visit the governor. The next two visits had very maritime themes. To attend the world's most important biennial shipping event, Posidonia, in Athens, is always a very special pleasure, but never more so than as Lord Mayor. In the UK, we have a very successful partnership between government and industry, and this was demonstrated by the attendance of the then shipping minister, Robert Goodwill, and by holding some meetings on board the Royal Fleet Auxiliary Cardigan Bay in Piraeus, the Royal Navy very kindly having located the vessel there to support our visit. The North American trip followed days after the referendum. In Panama, everyone was more concerned about the opening of the enlarged Panama Canal. I was honored to represent the British government at the event. The intense rivalry between the competing large container lines was wonderfully illustrated when a huge COSCO vessel transited the lock gates as part of the opening ceremony. Meanwhile, another large vessel of the AP Moller Maersk Group was prominently anchored in full view just a few hundred yards away. You somehow knew it was intentional. Many of you will know the very successful Mansion House Scholarship Scheme. I had the great pleasure of awarding the first maritime scholarship appropriately in Panama. And as the Lord Mayor will be away, I will have the honor of hosting the President at the Mansion House in 2 weeks' time. Moving on to Costa Rica, where I was once more the first Lord Mayor to visit, I met with President Solis, who I had had the pleasure of hosting in Mansion House in May, so he received a very warm welcome. Conversation topics included green finance and helping Costa Rica to gain OECD membership. We were greatly delayed taking off from San Jose Airport and wondered constantly if we would have to cancel the first event in following city, Dallas, an interview with the governor of the Dallas Federal Reserve Bank in front of a large invited audience. But the lady at the British consulate who had arranged the event was made of stern stuff and refused to throw in the sponge. We arrived hours late, but with the aid of the Dallas police force, I was whisked across town at breakneck speed, blue lights flashing and sirens wailing. The interview went ahead with only marginal delay. This was the first interview I had had overseas since the referendum, and the priority became to reassure markets and friends across the globe that this wasn't falling off a cliff edge, and that London was very much open for business, was adaptable, very innovative, and very good at coping with the unexpected. with an innate ability to reinvent itself, as demonstrated down the centuries, and not least in the year when we were celebrating the 350th anniversary of the Fire of London. Moving on to Chicago, the priorities were, once again, to reassure and to strengthen links with the futures market and the vibrant investment manager community there, as well as individual investors and public US pension funds. I was delighted when the Chicago Board Options Exchange announced while I was there the opening of an office in London, their first outside the US. There remained two big trips, both to the Far East. First came Japan and Korea. In Tokyo, there was huge interest in the Brexit decision. Japan has been a major investor in the UK and employs over 118,000 people here. There was considerable concern about future access of UK exports to the EU. I had to give major reassurance to the Europe Committee of the Kaiden-Ren, the Japanese equivalent of the CBI. There was also emphasis on maritime and fund management. In Korea, I visited the so-called southern powerhouse city of Busan, where I visited the world's largest floating structure, a floating LNG plant named Prelude, then under construction for Shell at the Samsung shipyard. I was very impressed with the fact that Shell's top project engineer, ladies and gentlemen, is a lady, which was interesting about that visit. It was pleasing to note that the structure, which will be employed processing natural gas off the coast of Australia, contains a significant amount of equipment manufactured in the UK. Busan Maritime University very kindly awarded me an honorary doctorate in maritime sciences, so respectability at last. And finally, China, specifically Shanghai, Beijing, and Hong Kong, accompanied by a strong business delegation. The Belt and Road Initiative was a frequent topic, and the awaited Hinkley Point decision was also the focus of much interest. It was resolved on the day we returned to the UK, in fact. I gained an overwhelming sense that China sees the opportunities emanating from the result of the referendum, with both officials and private sector stakeholders expressing faith in the future of ongoing Chinese and UK financial and other partnerships. My visit followed closely behind that of the Prime Minister attending the G20 Leaders Summit in Hangzhou. China put green finance at the heart of its G20 presidency and put it prominently in its 13th five-year plan. Maritime featured prominently in the trip, and there was also considerable interest to discuss fintech, and insurance was seen as an area for cooperation. In a memorable phrase, the Assistant Chairman of China Banking Regulatory Commission said, "Today we see the UK as part of the EU. Tomorrow it is the UK as part of the world." Thank you for staying with me on that lengthy part of my reflections journey. But let me just complete with a few words on the regional visits. I mentioned that 2/3 of the financial and professional services jobs are outside London. The relationship with the regions is therefore very important. We are complementary, and it is essential that the corporation is aware of the strengths of and the challenges faced by the regions. It is also important for the city to communicate to the wider nation the value and contribution of financial and professional services to the community, the economy, and the exchequer. I made visits to Northern Ireland, Scotland, the Northern Powerhouse, and Bristol and Cardiff, a total of 12 leading cities, a record, I'm pleased to say. I was very impressed by much that I saw, and really the one thing that, if I may be honest, quite shocked me actually, was the poor connectivity between the great cities of the north. I hope something will be done about that. I'm very pleased 2 years on to see the corporation's engagement with regional cities gaining additional resources and focus. My fourth reflection point is to note that the corporation has undoubtedly been changing gear, a process which I think probably began in 2015. But the process has been marked and is gathering pace. In a whole host of areas, we are seeking to up our contribution to London and the nation. In housing, just before I took office, the corporation committed to build an additional 3,700 new homes by 2025, its biggest house building program for 40 years. In education, the corporation has extended its scale significantly over the last 3 to 4 years. We now have 4 secondary academies, 3 primary academies, and 1 sixth form centre, and work closely with the one maintained primary school, 2 co-sponsored academies, and 3 independent schools the City of London Corporation supports. In culture, you will, I think, be aware of the exciting plans for the Culture Mile, which will benefit from the amazing connectivity afforded by the new Elizabeth line and will involve a new site for the London Museum, a new world-class concert hall, and considerably more. I also note that additional resources have been committed in 2 important areas. The Economic Development Office, which works to enhance the competitiveness of the city, informing policy and promoting export and investment around the world, and the Communications Department, which is focused on getting corporation policy out and understood, and ensuring the city's contribution to London and the nation is properly and transparently communicated. The corporation is also making considerable efforts to ensure that its elected members reflect the diversity of the city workforce and stakeholders. In another important development, which I would like to think dates from my year, there's growing awareness of mental health issues and what the corporation can do to ensure that city workers with mental health concerns are properly supported. The Lord Mayor's appeal under the banner A Better City for All has developed into a 3-year appeal which will benefit 3 charities, the Samaritans, Place to Be, and On-Site Youth Zones, each of which has different priorities in mental health and youth welfare. In addition, the Continuum, a group consisting of the current Lord Mayor and his or her likely successors, a concept which began some, I think, 4 years ago, continues to develop, resulting in increased coordination between successors and down the years to boost the effectiveness of successive Lord Mayor's themes and initiatives. As I draw towards the conclusion, my 5th reflection, which is to highlight the unique value and contribution of the livery. The presence of the livery in the city and its close, if informal, links to the corporation puts philanthropy at the heart of the city. Each new liveryman is enjoined to leave the world a better place than when they entered it. What a better precept to live by. Meantime, its financial contribution, commitment to education, support for the armed forces and cadets, and time given all continue to increase. And many hundreds of years after the first companies were founded, new guilds are being formed. How very positive, how very British. My 6th and final reflection, you'll be relieved to hear, is the importance of the city's connections with the armed forces and reserves. As an honorary reserve officer myself, I'm constantly struck by the professionalism and dedication of our forces, and not forgetting, by the way, the crucial role played by reservists as marshals in the Lord Mayor's show. At a time when many of us feel more needs to be spent on our defence, it is vital that those serving in the forces know that they are valued and held in the highest esteem. One of the high points of my year was presenting what we call City Privilege Regiment status to HMS President, the headquarters of the Royal Naval Reserve in London, at a ceremony in Mansion House. This is the highest honour that the city can confer on a services establishment and confers the right to march through the city with bayonets fixed. We should all be proud that the City of London is officially affiliated to HMS Queen Elizabeth, the largest ship ever built for the Royal Navy. And on a personal note, I'm so delighted that Commander Simon Kelly, Royal Navy, commanding officer of HMS Westminster, my own affiliated Royal Navy ship, could be with us this evening. And finally, some very big thank yous. Firstly, to our headline sponsor, Azad Ayoub Limited, and gold sponsor, Howard de Walden Estates, both of whom have supported this event now for 2 years. Long may this continue. And of course, our registration area sponsor, P&O Cruises. Thank you all so much. Without you, this event could not be possible. And I want to give special thanks to the talented young musicians from the Royal College of Music Junior Department and Miranda Francis. And thank you to the Worshipful Company of Glaziers for their continued support. Thank you to our diversity speaker, Cyrus Toddy-Waller, OBEDL, and to the budding chefs from Colchester Institute, a winning team from Cyrus's Zest Quest Asia competition, who created the delicious canapé. The student chefs and their tutor, Chef Ian Perkins, are here tonight. And thank you to some members of the Shellfish Association of Great Britain, as well as truly traceable wild Suffolk venison and asparagus from St John's Farm, Norfolk asparagus, who provided the sensational ingredients. Special thanks to Reflections founder and organizer, Chris Xiao, who puts everything into organizing this special evening. Chris, well done and warmest thanks. And finally, thank you all for coming and supporting the Sea Cadets, whose wonderful City of London unit, of which I am the proud president, provided the very smart carpet guard. The Marine Society and Sea Cadets continues to work hard to be available to ever more young people, but funds are needed to support the life-changing opportunity it gives them. You can help through becoming a benefactor of their vital work or supporting members from the charity here tonight, and I'd be delighted to introduce you. Thank you all very much. Not so easy. Yes, I remember now. Yes. Please, could I invite any questions? Trevor.
Thank you. Lord Mountevans, thank you for a wonderful speech. Forgive me, my question is not in Finnish, Norwegian, French, or Russian. It relates not to your around the world in 80 days, but something far closer to home, where both you and Sir David had the honour of being on the steps of St Paul's to welcome the Queen. I remember you standing there holding a very heavy pearl sword for an indubitable amount of time. What was going through your mind whilst that was happening?
Thank you, Trevor. Well, I can tell you what wasn't going through my mind was the weight of the sword. When you have the honour, David, to be standing there awaiting your sovereign in this unique place, the weight of the sword counts for nothing. That wasn't the problem. The sword bearer was sort of next to me, and we realized there was something wrong. But the thing is, you can't really sort of talk very much. And, you know, all these cameras are looking at you. I'm sure there's skilled lip readers out there, so we were very cautious about what we were sort of half-mouthed. What we found out was that, you know, that it was a very rare occasion, because on the Queen's 90th birthday at the St Paul's service, the whole royal family were there, which is a very rare event. Now, the police are incredibly talented, as we all know, and they can control the traffic and make it all happen. But there's a limit. You know, there has to be a limit. And actually, they'd done such a brilliant job that suddenly there was gridlock. And I think Her Majesty was not amused at all to have to go out over the South Bank and come over and arrive 15 minutes late. But by the time she'd got to the top of the steps, I think she was in a very good mood once again, and it was a splendid service. Thank you. Another question, please. May I invite one?
Lord Mountevans, the question is, would you do it again?
Well, you know, this happens with livery masters. You know, we've had the mayoralty for over 800 years, and we're up to sort of 690 now. In the early years, of course, you could do it for 2 or even 3 years. But it's very clearly just 1 year now. I think it's an absolutely fantastic honour, utterly stimulating, interesting, and absorbing. I think probably, you know, you come out of it slightly different to how you went into it. You're definitely an older person, and I think I'd say that it would be suitable for a younger person next. Don't be shy. You know, but what happens? It's always the same, isn't it? We start slowly, and then everybody will suddenly want, and we'll be cut off before we can finish.
My Lord, thank you very much for your reflections. But your reflection only mentioned Brexit briefly. But I guess Brexit was a big event during your term. How do you, I'm not maybe asking for your foresight, for the future of the City of London if Brexit does happen in the future? Maybe it may not happen. So how Brexit will affect the city?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Minister. And it's a very good question. Of course, you've only got a short time to speak anyway, and this is a huge topic. And also, I'm very well aware that in any group of people who are in, there are going to be some very fine people on both sides of the argument. So, it's perhaps not a great point to go into it. We're all getting rather a degree of fatigue about the discussion, aren't we? But I'm a very big believer and optimist about the people of this country. Whatever happens, it's rather like that story about, I think it was whatever president's wife said, what would have happened if you'd married somebody other than me? And she said, oh, he'd still be president of the United States. I'd be very optimistic for the outcome for this country. It's not typically what we wanted for the city. And before the referendum, I made very many speeches saying that I thought we were better off in. But there is also, a strong advantage of being out. And I think that it would give a whole lot of opportunities. And I think the more we go through the process, the more we're seeing the opportunities. So I think that, there's a very positive spirit, notably in the city, of course, where I work, and that, you're very influenced, aren't you, in whatever bubble you're in. But I think that increasingly across the country, and we see this on the maritime side, there's increasing awareness of the opportunities. So, as I said earlier on, the first time I was speaking after the referendum abroad, it's not like falling off a cliff face, I don't think. But thank you very much. I hope that answers your question.
Lord Mountevans, your mayoralty was a phenomenal time for the maritime service industries, and it gave us a tremendous boost in the arm. It was tremendously successful for us, and we've really gone forward based on many of the foundations that you very kindly laid. But if I may say so, not wishing to be rude, I know that your very successful year would have been for naught had it not been for Lady Mountevans. And if I may,
Yes,
could I pass the microphone across to her, because I would very much like to hear what she thought of the whole year, running around after you, supporting you to the hilt, as we all know who were involved with your year. And I would be very interested to hear your views, Lady Mountevans.
It was absolutely great, living in the mansion house and meeting such great people. But we couldn't have done it without the help of so many people around here, who we're really grateful to all the people who helped us and who contributed and who showed enthusiasm and who came to dinner. So it was all a coming together of many people. And thank you very much for all your help, all of you.
I think that's very, very well put. And Harry, I think it was an excellent point you made. I mean, Juliet's support and encouragement and sense of humor was invaluable throughout all of this. But if you look back, actually, the most important thing of it all is the people, because you meet so many fascinating people. And here in the city, everybody wants it to be a success. Everybody's involved. Everybody's played their part at some moment or point in the journey. So it's actually far more of a team effort than I think people outside would ever imagine. As I said right at the outset, it's all of the support.
Good evening, Lord Mountevans. I'm Sean Ilias, and what is it like to be in the House of Lords?
Well, it's quite interesting at the moment. I was lucky enough to be elected in the summer of 15, just before I became Lord Mayor. And actually, I didn't engage with it for probably at least 18 months because I was busy doing certain other things that we've been talking about. Trying to get more involved now. I've got to say to you, I am so impressed with the House of Lords. One of the things you're intensely aware of when you do speak, and I'm trying to get increasingly involved, but you've got to be so careful you know what you're talking about, because really, however much you know, it's almost certain that there's somebody there who knows as much or more than you do, which is actually a jolly good reason to make you keep to the point and not get over expansive. I find them courteous, very well informed. They listen to each other, the different parties and so on, in a way that is not so to be noted in the other place, if as we all know, always, not always to be noted. Of course, there's a particular, the withdrawal bill is a particularly sort of touchstone moment. And actually, because I'm still incredibly involved in the city, and it's a whole story, I'm on the whole not deeply involved in it, because I don't think you can just step in, do one vote. And actually, if you haven't listened to the whole story, there are excellent arguments being advanced. I would regard myself as a sort of quiet Ramona, but I think that, well, everybody has their view. We shall see what happens.
Thank you very much.
I think there was, yes, right over there, please.
Lord Mountevans, my original question of what was your best moment has already been asked, so I'm going to ask you the converse. What was your worst moment of the year?
Do you know, I don't think there were any really. I really don't. I mean, of course, there were some slightly hilarious moments. I remember once, after I felt really privileged. Juliet and I were invited down to the opening of the National Maritime Museum's exhibition about Pepys, celebrating the 350th anniversary, in particular, the Great Fire and so on. And the traffic was unbelievable, and we ended up getting out of the car about sort of 1,000 yards from the museum and running, Juliet taking her high heels off and all of us running to get there, just in time to make the speech and then leave. Didn't even have a sort of glass of anything, just went straight away, because we were going to dinner, if I recall, at Carpenter's later that evening, who'd been very good in accepting I'd be slightly late. But I think Juliet was taken back in the car, but it was just, it felt that I had to be there at some particular moment. And the Port of London Authority very kindly arranged a boat, sort of quite a high-speed boat, to take us up the river and let us off here at Tower Pier, where we met by car. Well, we changed in the dark, which was quite funny, but this constant rig changing, as you know, is part of the whole journey and experience. And the program manager with me, Neil Crimes, actually, very carefully having changed, got back in the same pair of trousers. So he was immaculately black tie from here up, and his stripy kind of pinstripe trousers underneath, which caused a degree of mirth, I remember, at the Carpenters. Yeah, I can't point to any truly awful moments. And I don't wake up in the night thinking, oh my God, when that happened, Because people are so helpful. If anything looked like it was going remotely wrong, probably they'd saved it before the whole... Oh, I'll tell you one wonderful moment, which Christine might remember. I wonder if you know what it is, Christine. But, all these things that you're so privileged to do in the city, we were awarding an architecture prize, which was awarded to the Cheese Grater for being the most exciting new building in the city. And, there was a little sort of curtain on the thing. And at a certain moment, I think, probably said 2 or 3 words, and then sort of pulled one side, nothing happened, pulled the other side, nothing happened. So at this point, I give it a great yank, and the whole plaque came off. And no, that would have been almost slightly embarrassing, but everyone thought it was so hilarious, the funniest thing they'd ever seen. It was a very good moment, pure slapstick. And actually, in fact, it wasn't sort of screwed on. The steel upright girders are such high sort of tensile steel, you can't actually drill into them. So it is affixed magnetically. So it wasn't that I'd sort of suddenly developed superhuman strength or anything.
Good evening. My name is Vida Filmonevichuda, and I had the privilege of being here last year for Sir Roger Gifford, who enlisted the beverages he unpacked when he moved to Mansion House. And I was just wondering, what was the first box that you unpacked when you got to Mansion House? Was it whiskies, port, wine?
I'm not going to look at Juliet, because there's an awful lot of them that we haven't even looked at to this day. I'm ashamed. Certainly, there are all sorts of things, the sort of wine where there's sort of 3 bottles of this or that. So we're doing a good job quietly ploughing through things with friends now and again. That's a very pleasant part of it. But actually, the problem of stowage in modern life, it's what to do with it. And there's very important things in there, and we're going to have to delve into it and do it properly. And that's a job, I think, for this summer. But I can't point to anything particularly a kind of road to Damascus moment when we opened a box and said, oh, there's the such and such. Trevor.
First, if I may, I had the privilege of following you and Juliet down the abseil of St Lawrence Jury, and just wondered what your thoughts were on that. But the other question is, one hears through the grapevine the Lord Mayor's no longer being rowed up the river, or in this particular year. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, by the way, Trevor, I mean, it's very interesting that you're standing up. Trevor was an incredibly successful and hardworking honorary secretary of my ward club for a very long time, far longer than he should have had to do it. He was absolutely first class. And it looks like a complete fix that your name was drawn out the hat, because it was well deserved to get that bottle of gin or whatever it was. So I wish you wouldn't keep drawing attention to this, Trevor. You know, you should be keeping your head down. The upside down, we chose, I mean, now, of course, it's become the rage to go off extremely tall buildings. We just were worried whether there'd be enough demand of people who wanted to do it. I mean, there's the young diehards, but whether, you know, the great mass of the city and good folk that we all know would want to do that. So we chose St Lawrence Jury. I listened very carefully to the instructions. I just thought I should. And this came in quite handy when halfway down, the rope that you let yourself down, it just came straight out of my hand and went shooting off up above me. So there I was suspended, sort of, you know. But I wasn't worried. I was just thought, this is, you know, this will be sorted out, which it was quite quickly. And I remember, of course, Lawson, you went down quite soon after me. And Lawson is quite a big man, and I think probably came down faster than I did, but it was all brilliantly accomplished. Yes, exactly. But I think, you know, the current Lord Mayor, Charles Bowman, he's planning to go off the top of, I'm trying to think, but one of the... Yes, right. So, I mean, that really is quite a sort of trial by ordeal, I think. Oh, the rowing down the river. Well, I think the demands of security increase all the time. And I mean, I can't give you a definitive answer, but I've heard similar stories myself that it's under consideration. When we did it, we were slightly unlucky in that Gloriana couldn't get out from the dock gates because that same weather that caused such a drama on the day of the show and during the night prevented Gloriana, which at that time had a rather smaller engine, actually being able to get out of St. Catherine's Dock into the river, even at the right tide state, because of the wind and the swell. So we actually did all of this in a kind of sort of a ferry, you know, a Thames cruiser, but it was great fun nonetheless. And I very much enjoyed it. Of course, it was fantastic to disembark at HMS President and see, and you know, if you're interested in naval stuff, that was really wonderful. Yes, Simon.
Do you feel you made a difference to a reflection on the maritime? And if there's something you could take away and carry on, how do we avoid forgetting that we're an island nation? How do we remain maritime focused?
Well, I think it's an excellent question. It's a particular challenge in this country. We have extremely successful sort of maritime sector in many ways. We don't have the hugest fleet anymore, and we don't have a big shipbuilding industry, but there's lots of innovation, and we have a very, very strong, world-leading professional business service section, and we have obviously a great Royal Navy. One of the challenges we face is that when some of us in this room were younger, it was very common for people to go to New York by ship, even to Australia. You know, now you might go on a cruise if you were of a certain age bracket. Not that many young people do. The young people, they go everywhere by plane. They don't relate to ships. And, you know, they're not even aware that, you know, 90% of the food in this country, you know, or you know, goods come by sea. It's a critical service for this country, and this is a challenge for us, and indeed other countries too, I know. I mean, there's similar issues being discussed in Japan and elsewhere around the world. I think that we are lucky. We have, I mean, Harry was just speaking a couple of minutes ago. We have some very outstanding people committed to a success of this. There's a lot of work going in. We were very lucky with this maritime growth study that I was honoured to chair, because it came at a particular moment and the industry bought tremendously into it and invested a great deal, and there's a great deal of energy going into following up. So, you know, that and a very strong relationship with the Department for Transport, I think we're headed to a good place, and I think the innovation is very important here. You know, there will be profound change in all the businesses we know in the next 10 to 20 years, and I think if, you know, your business, in my case maritime, thinks about trying to be up with those changes, then you're better placed to make a success of the future.
Thank you, Lord Mountevans, for sharing with us your reflections of your time as Lord Mayor and your fascinating insights into current and future opportunities and challenges. Hearing your thoughts and perspectives can give us all confidence that when it comes to the City of London and UK PLC, the future is ours to grasp. Thank you.